Colorado Territory, 1876. The dirt road leading into Silvercreek wound like a patient snake through pine-covered hills, carrying with it a stagecoach and its lone female passenger. 22-year-old Felicity Taylor stared out the window, her honey-blonde hair pulled back in a simple chignon, her blue traveling dress wrinkled from 3 days of hard travel. The afternoon sun caught the white scar that ran from the corner of her right eye down to her jawline, a permanent reminder of why she'd fled Boston for the untamed West. "No one will want me now," she whispered to herself, touching the marred flesh with gentle fingers. The carriage accident that had claimed her parents had also stolen her beauty and her future as a society wife. But more painful than the physical scars were the ones no one could see. The crushing loneliness, the whispers behind fans, the withdrawn marriage proposals. She'd come west to disappear, to find a place where she could live quietly as the schoolteacher Silvercreek had advertised for, a place where she expected nothing more than tolerance from strangers. Love wasn't for women like her. Not anymore. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Silvercreek's only hotel, a 2-story wooden building with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Felicity gathered her courage along with her carpetbag, preparing to face her new reality. "Miss Taylor." A tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest stepped forward. "Sheriff Miller. The school board asked me to meet you." His eyes flickered briefly to her scar before settling politely on her hat. "Town's mighty pleased to have a real Boston-educated teacher." She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'm looking forward to beginning my duties." That was the first lie of many she would tell in Silvercreek. The truth was she wasn't looking forward to anything. She was simply existing, surviving, hiding her scars, both visible and invisible, from a world that had no place for damaged goods. Yates O'Malley never planned to stay in one place for long. At 25, he'd already driven cattle from Texas to Kansas, broken horses in Wyoming, and worked silver mines in Nevada. His latest job as ranch foreman at the Circle M outside Silvercreek was just another stop on an endless road. The young cowboy had watched too many good men die. In the war, on the trail, in saloon fights over nothing, to believe that putting down roots was anything but a fool's errand. The West ain't for settling, he often told the hands he supervised. It's for surviving. His handsome face, usually lit with an easy smile beneath short brown hair, grew solemn when he said it. His green eyes, which crinkled at the corners when he laughed, turned distant, remembering things a man his age shouldn't have seen. Orphaned during the war and raised by a succession of trail bosses and ranch hands, Yates knew only one truth. Attachment was dangerous. The only consistent thing in life was movement. Keep riding, keep working, keep your heart guarded behind a wall of friendly charm. Until the summer day, he rode into town for supplies and saw her. She stood on the schoolhouse steps, golden hair catching the sunlight, a book clutched to her chest like armor. Even from a distance, he could see she held herself apart from the mothers collecting their children, her smile never reaching her eyes. When she turned, revealing the scar on her face, something in Yates' chest tightened. It wasn't pity. He'd seen far worse injuries on men he'd ridden with. It was recognition. Here was someone else wearing their wounds where others could see them. Their eyes met across the dusty street, and for one suspended moment, Yates felt the ground shift beneath him. Then she looked away, her face closing like a book too precious to share. Felicity had been in Silvercreek for 3 weeks when she first spoke to the cowboy everyone called O'Malley. She'd noticed him watching her from afar, not with the morbid curiosity she was accustomed to, but with something more unsettling, understanding. The encounter happened at Marshall's General Store on a Saturday afternoon. She reached for a tin of tea on the top shelf, stretching on tiptoes, when a tanned hand appeared beside hers, easily retrieving it. "Miss Taylor." His voice was gentle, with a hint of Texas in its cadence. "Thought you might need some help." She turned to face him, instinctively angling her scarred side away. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley." "Yates O'Malley, ma'am. Foreman over at the Circle M." He handed her the tea, his smile reaching eyes the color of sage after rain. "Yes, I've seen you at Sunday services." She took the tin, careful not to let their fingers touch. "And I've watched you with the children. You're good with them." Something in his tone, simple appreciation without the careful avoidance she was accustomed to, made her meet his gaze directly. He was looking at her full on, not casting furtive glances at her scar or studiously avoiding it. "Children are honest," she said. "They ask about my face once, accept the answer, and move on. Adults are less direct." He nodded, leaning against the counter. "People fear what reminds them life's fragile." The observation, delivered without pity, startled her. Most men wouldn't speak so plainly to a lady. Most ladies wouldn't want them to. He smiled, the expression warming his entire face. "But I reckon you've had enough of folks dancing around what's right in front of them." Before she could respond, Mrs. Marshall called from the counter. "Your order's ready, Mr. O'Malley." He tipped his hat. "Miss Taylor, hope to see you around town." As he collected his supplies and left, Felicity realized she was clutching the tea tin so tightly her knuckles had gone white. For the first time since arriving in Silvercreek, someone had looked at her, really looked at her, and hadn't turned away. The realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The schoolhouse roof began leaking during the first autumn rainstorm, water dripping steadily onto the back row of desks. Felicity had placed buckets to catch the worst of it, but by the following morning, it was clear more substantial repairs were needed. "I'll send for O'Malley," Sheriff Miller told her after inspection. "Circle M can spare him for a day, and he's handy with more than just horses." Felicity's protest died on her lips. She'd avoided the young foreman since their encounter at the store, crossing the street when she saw him coming, declining invitations to town socials where he might attend. His directness had unsettled her carefully constructed defenses. Yates arrived the next morning before school hours, tools loaded in a wagon, hat in hand as he greeted her at the schoolhouse door. "Morning, Miss Taylor. Sheriff says you've got a situation needs fixing." She led him inside, pointing out the damaged section. "The children can't learn if they're being dripped on, Mr. O'Malley." "Yates," he corrected gently. "Only the ranch owner calls me Mr. O'Malley, and that's when he's fixing to fire me." His smile invited her to share the joke. She didn't. "I'll leave you to your work, then." He caught her arm as she turned to go, releasing it immediately when she stiffened. "Sorry, ma'am. I could use a hand holding the ladder. If you wouldn't mind." It was a transparent excuse. Yates O'Malley had clearly worked alone in far more dangerous conditions than a leaky schoolhouse roof. But something in his expression, hope mingled with respect, made her nod. They worked together through the morning, him on the roof, her steadying the ladder and handing up supplies. Gradually, her tension eased as they fell into conversation about the town, the coming winter, books they'd both read. "Never had much schooling myself," he admitted, hammering a shingle into place. "Learned to read from a trail cook with 3-dime novels and a Bible. Read them so many times I had them memorized." "Which was your favorite?" she asked, genuinely curious. "The Bible," he answered without hesitation. "Not for the religion, mind you, though that has its place. But the stories, David and Goliath, Joseph sold by his brothers, Ruth following Naomi to a strange land. Real people making hard choices in harder times." The insight surprised her. "I wouldn't have expected a cowboy to be a biblical scholar." He laughed, the sound warm and unrehearsed. "Hardly that. Just a man who recognizes good storytelling when he sees it." By midday, the roof was mended and Yates was packing his tools. "Should hold through winter now," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But if it gives you any trouble, you send word to the Circle M." "Thank you." She stood awkwardly by the door, unsure how to end this unexpected interlude. "What do I owe you for the repairs?" "Nothing at all." He settled his hat on his head. "But if you're feeling generous, the town's having a harvest dance Saturday next. I'd consider it payment if you'd save me a dance." Fear flashed through her. "I don't dance, Mr. O'Malley." "Everyone dances, Miss Taylor. Some just need reminding how." He climbed into his wagon. "I'll be there either way. Hope you reconsider." As he drove away, Felicity touched her scar, the old habit returning with her anxiety. She hadn't danced since before the accident. The thought of being watched, being held at arm's length by a partner trying not to stare at her face, it was unbearable. Yet as she prepared for afternoon lessons, she found herself wondering what it might be like to dance with someone who looked at her scars and saw only her. The harvest dance transformed Silvercreek's town hall into a warm haven against the October chill. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting golden light over trestle tables laden with food. A 3-piece band played in the corner while couples swirled across the wooden floor. Felicity hadn't planned to attend. She'd spent the evening marking arithmetic papers, telling herself she was content with her quiet life, her solitary existence. But when the clock struck 8, she found herself changing into her best dress, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and pinning her hair up with trembling fingers. Just for an hour, she told her reflection. Just to show your face and be sociable. She entered the hall quietly, hoping to blend into the background. Several parents greeted her warmly, introducing her to relatives visiting from Denver and Colorado Springs. She accepted a cup of punch and found a corner where she could observe without being observed. Then the crowd parted, and there he was. Yates stood across the room, dressed in clean black trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. He was listening intently to old Mrs. Henderson, nodding at whatever story she was telling, but his eyes scanned the room until they found Felicity. The smile that crossed his face made her heart stumble in its steady rhythm. He excused himself from Mrs. Henderson and made his way toward her, weaving between dancers with the same easy grace he showed on horseback. "Miss Taylor." He stopped before her, respecting her space. "You came. Only for a little while," she said, clutching her punch cup like a shield. "Then I'd best not waste time." He extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" The band had begun a waltz, couples moving in elegant circles around the floor. Felicity's throat tightened. "I told you I don't. One dance," he said softly. "If you hate every second, I'll bring you straight back to this corner and won't ask again." Perhaps it was the challenge in his eyes. Perhaps it was the way he stood there, hand outstretched, patient as the mountains. Or perhaps it was simple loneliness, the hunger for human touch she'd denied for so long. Whatever the reason, Felicity set down her punch and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed gently around hers as he led her to the floor. When he turned to face her, placing one hand at her waist and raising their joined hands, she realized with a start that he'd positioned himself so her scarred side was away from the crowd, visible only to him. "You don't have to do that," she whispered as they began to move. "Hide me away." "I'm not hiding you," he answered, guiding her through the first turn. "I'm giving you one less thing to worry about while you remember how to dance." The consideration, without pity, left her speechless. As they moved together, Felicity gradually relaxed into the familiar steps. Yates was a surprisingly good dancer, leading with confidence, but without force. "Where did a cowboy learn to waltz?" she asked after a particularly graceful turn. "San Antonio. Drove a herd down there 3 years back and stayed the winter. Found out ladies don't mind a man's rough edges if he can move them around a dance floor without stomping their toes." She couldn't help her smile. "And did many ladies overlook your rough edges, Mr. O'Malley?" "Not the ones that mattered." His eyes held hers, suddenly serious. "The ones that matter see past the polish to what's underneath." The music ended before she could respond. Couples around them applauded the band, but Yates still held her hand, making no move to return her to her corner. "One more," he asked as the musicians struck up a slower tune. She should say no, should retreat to safety, to the carefully constructed walls that protected her. Instead, she nodded, and felt something long dormant flutter to life in her chest as he drew her closer for the second dance. Winter descended on Silvercreek with a vengeance, bringing howling blizzards that buried the town in snow. School continued between storms, children arriving bundled in layers, the pot-bellied stove in the corner working overtime to keep the classroom warm. Felicity found herself watching the window more often, looking for a particular silhouette on horseback. Since the harvest dance, Yates had found reasons to be in town. Supplies needed fetching, mail to collect, church services to attend. Each time, he sought her out, their conversations growing longer, more meaningful. He'd walked her home 3 times now, standing respectfully at the base of her boarding house steps, hat in hand as they talked until the cold drove them apart. He'd never presumed, never pushed, but his interest was clear in every look, every carefully chosen word. It terrified her how much she'd begun to look forward to those encounters. The blizzard that struck 2 days before Christmas was the worst in memory. Wind shrieked down from the mountains, driving snow in horizontal sheets that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. School had been dismissed early, the children collected by worried parents as the storm approached. Felicity was gathering her things when Sheriff Miller burst through the door, snow coating his heavy coat. "Miss Taylor, Thank God you're still here. We've got trouble. Her heart stopped. What's happened? O'Malley and two of the Circle M hands got caught in the storm bringing Christmas supplies to town. They got separated. The hands made it in, but O'Malley's missing. The world tilted sideways. Missing? But he knows this country better than his horse came in without him. They think he was thrown. The sheriff's grave expression said what he wouldn't. Men died in such storms every winter. We're organizing search parties, but with night coming and this weather, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what it meant. I want to help, Felicity said, already reaching for her coat. No, ma'am. Too dangerous. Best thing you can do is pray. As the sheriff left to coordinate the search, Felicity sank into her chair, hands trembling. The thought of Yates alone in the blizzard, injured or worse, opened a chasm of fear she hadn't known existed within her. When had he become so important? When had his smile, his steady presence, his way of seeing her, truly seeing her, become something she couldn't bear to lose? The answer came with painful clarity. From the first moment he'd looked at her scar without flinching. From the first time he'd treated her as a woman, not a tragedy. She couldn't lose him now, not before she'd found the courage to admit what he was coming to mean to her. Night had fallen, the storm still raging, when a commotion outside her boarding house drew Felicity to the window. Through swirling snow, she made out several figures struggling up the street. At their center, supported between two men, was a familiar form. She was down the stairs and out the door before conscious thought took hold, heedless of the biting cold as she ran toward them. We found him in the creek bed, half a mile out. One of the searchers called over the wind. Horse threw him against some rocks. He's banged up pretty bad, but he kept asking for you. Yates' head lifted at her approach, blood frozen on his temple, face gray with cold and pain. But his eyes, those expressive green eyes, lit up when they found her. Felicity, he said, his voice barely audible above the storm. It was the first time he'd used her given name. Get him to Doc Wilson's, she told the men, falling into step beside them. I'm coming with you. The doctor's house was warm and bright, a stark contrast to the howling darkness outside. They carried Yates to an examination room, while Felicity waited anxiously in the parlor, pacing until Mrs. Wilson gently pressed her into a chair and placed a cup of tea in her trembling hands. An hour passed before Doc Wilson emerged, wiping his hands on a towel. He's lucky, the older man said without preamble. Cracked ribs, nasty gash on his head, hypothermia, but nothing that won't heal. Another hour out there. He shook his head. The boy's asking for you. Felicity hesitated only a moment before following the doctor back to the small room. Yates lay on a narrow bed, head bandaged, chest wrapped in white strips of cloth. Despite his injuries, he tried to sit up when she entered. Don't you dare, she admonished, hurrying to his side to press him gently back. You've done enough foolish things for one day. He captured her hand as she withdrew it, his fingers cold against her warm ones. Had to get to town, he murmured. Promised to help with the Christmas pageant. A laugh that was half sob escaped her. The pageant can manage without you, Yates O'Malley. But can you? The directness of his gaze pinned her in place. I heard you ran out in the storm. Without a proper coat. I was worried, she admitted, unable to dissemble under those searching eyes. Why? The simple question demanded truth. Felicity touched her scar unconsciously, a gesture Yates had come to recognize. His hand rose to cover hers, drawing it away from her face. You don't need to hide with me, he said softly. Not ever. Something inside her, a dam built of fear and rejection, began to crack. I've been hiding so long, I'm not sure I know how to stop. I could help with that. Despite his injuries, his smile was the same, warm, genuine, reaching his eyes. If you'd let me. Felicity looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. Why would you want to? Because from the moment I saw you on those schoolhouse steps, I recognized something in you. Something that matched what's in me. He squeezed her fingers gently. We're both running, Felicity. Me from putting down roots. You from letting anyone close enough to see past that scar. And I'm tired of running. The truth of his words resonated through her. I'm afraid, she whispered. So am I. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. But I'm more afraid of never knowing what might have been. Of riding away from Silvercreek in spring without telling you that you're the first thing that's made me want to stay put in my whole life. Outside. The blizzard raged on, but within the small room, something fragile and new began to take root. Spring came to Colorado in fits and starts, snow giving way to mud, then to tender green shoots pushing through thawed earth. Yates recovered from his injuries and returned to the Circle M, but his visits to town increased. Every Sunday after church, he escorted Felicity on walks through Silvercreek's awakening gardens. Twice a week, he appeared at the schoolhouse as lessons ended, offering to carry her books back to the boarding house. The town noticed. How could they not? The handsome young foreman and their scarred schoolteacher, heads bent close in conversation, sharing private smiles and lingering farewells at her doorstep. Felicity found, to her surprise, that she didn't mind the attention. For the first time since her accident, the looks that followed her weren't pitying or curious about her disfigurement. They were the same looks that followed any couple growing closer with each passing day. But as wildflowers carpeted the hills and talk turned to summer, a shadow fell across their budding relationship. Mr. Harrington offered me the foreman position at his ranch outside Denver, Yates told her one evening as they sat on her boarding house porch. Better pay, bigger operation. The words fell between them like stones. Felicity's hands stilled in her lap. I see. When would you leave? End of the month. If I accept. She looked away, watching a robin hop across the new grass. It sounds like a fine opportunity. Felicity. He reached for her hand, waiting until she met his gaze. I haven't given him my answer yet. Why not? It's what you've always done, isn't it? Move on when something better comes along. The bitterness in her voice surprised them both. Pain flickered across his face. That's not fair, isn't it? You told me yourself, the West isn't for settling. She pulled her hand free. I understand, Yates. I've always understood this would be temporary. Is that what you think this is? Some passing fancy until the trail calls me elsewhere. His voice rose with frustration. Damn it, Felicity, I've been trying for months to show you that you're different. That this is different. How am I supposed to believe that? The fear that had lurked beneath their happiness surfaced at last. Everyone leaves eventually. At least you're honest enough to tell me first. He stood abruptly, pacing the small porch. You know what your trouble is? You're so convinced no one could want you because of that scar, you can't see what's right in front of you. A man who doesn't give a damn about what's on your face because he's fallen in love with what's in your heart. The word love hung in the air between them, electric and terrifying. You don't mean that, she whispered. The hell I don't. He knelt before her, taking her hands despite her resistance. Felicity Taylor, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me want things I never thought I deserved. A home, a future, a family. Tears blurred her vision. You can't. I can. I do. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. But loving someone means wanting their happiness above your own. So if you truly want me to take that job in Denver, tell me now, and I'll go. The choice crystallized before her. Trust in what they'd built or retreat to the safety of her walls. Before she could answer, the boarding house door opened, Mrs. Potter's voice interrupting the moment. Miss Taylor, telegram came for you. Boy said it was important. Felicity took the yellow paper with numb fingers, breaking the seal as Yates stood and moved to the porch railing, giving her space. As she read, the color drained from her face. What is it? He asked, concern replacing frustration. My uncle in Boston. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. He's gravely ill. Asking for me. She looked up, lost. He's the only family I have left. Yates didn't hesitate. Then you must go to him. But no buts. Family is family. His expression softened. When would you leave? The next eastbound train. Tomorrow. The timing couldn't have been worse. With the question of his future in Denver still unresolved, and now her sudden departure for Boston, everything between them seemed to be unraveling like a poorly woven rope. How long will you be gone? He asked quietly. I don't know. Felicity folded the telegram carefully. Uncle Edwin raised me after my parents died. I can't leave him alone if he's dying. Of course not. Yates straightened, his face settling into careful neutrality. You should go pack. I'll come by in the morning to take you to the station. As he descended the porch steps, Felicity called after him. Yates, about Denver. He turned back, silhouetted against the setting sun. We'll talk when you return. If you return. The doubt in those last words followed her inside, echoing her own deepest fear. that whatever they'd begun had just ended before it truly had a chance to grow. Boston was exactly as Felicity remembered, and nothing like it at all. The familiar streets and buildings remained, but she moved through them as a stranger, changed irrevocably by her time in the West. The society that had once rejected her now barely registered her presence. She was neither fish nor fowl, too marked for Boston's drawing rooms, too refined for frontier saloons. Uncle Edwin rallied briefly after her arrival, but declined steadily through the hot summer months. Felicity sat by his bedside, reading to him from his favorite books, telling him stories of Silvercreek and her students. She mentioned Yates only once, unable to discuss what she wasn't sure existed anymore. Letters came from Colorado, updates from the school board, notes from her students, a long letter from Mrs. Potter about town happenings. None from Yates. She told herself it was for the best. Their parting had left too much unsaid, too many questions unanswered. Better to let the distance do what neither of them had the courage to do in person. End things cleanly. August brought Edwin's passing and the complicated business of his estate. As his only living relative, Felicity inherited a modest but comfortable fortune, enough to secure her future anywhere she chose to live. The lawyer handling the estate made his opinion clear. A young woman of your means should remain in Boston, he advised, peering at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. The West is no place for a lady alone, particularly one with your sensitive nature. Felicity touched her scar, the old habit returning during her months in Boston, where eyes slid away from her face in practiced avoidance. My sensitive nature served me quite well in Colorado, Mr. Farnsworth. Perhaps, but with your inheritance, you could live comfortably here. Even find a suitable match, despite your misfortune. The condescension in his tone crystallized something that had been forming in Felicity's heart since returning east. Boston might have been her birthplace, but it was no longer home. Home was snow-capped mountains and endless skies. Home was children who looked at her scar with curiosity rather than revulsion. Home was a young cowboy who had seen beyond her damage to the woman beneath. If he was still waiting, "I'll be returning to Colorado," she said, rising from her chair. "Please arrange for my inheritance to be transferred to the Silvercreek Bank." Mr. Farnsworth sputtered protests, but Felicity had made her decision. Whether or not Yates O'Malley was still in Silvercreek, whether or not he'd taken the Denver position, she knew where she belonged now. The West had taught her she was stronger than her scars. It was time to claim that strength. October painted Colorado's aspen groves gold by the time Felicity's train pulled into the station nearest Silvercreek. No one knew she was coming. She'd wanted to arrive quietly, to take the stagecoach into town without fanfare. But as she descended from the train, carpetbag in hand, a familiar figure stepped out from the station platform's shadow. Yates stood tall and straight, hat in hand, as handsome as she remembered. His face was thinner, his eyes more guarded, but the sight of him still stole her breath. "How did you know?" she asked when she could speak. "Telegram from the estate lawyer. Said you were coming home." He hesitated. "Are you? Coming home?" "Yes." The single word carried all her certainty. He nodded, a muscle working in his jaw. "I brought the wagon. Thought you might have trunks. Just this and one trunk." She gestured to her luggage. "I traveled light. Always practical." A ghost of his old smile appeared. "That's one of the things I always admired about you." The past tense wasn't lost on her. They walked in silence to the wagon, Yates loading her trunk with efficient movements before helping her up to the seat. As they pulled away from the station, the questions she'd carried across a continent demanded answers. "Did you take the Denver position?" she asked, watching his profile. "No." His hands were steady on the reins. "Stayed on at the Circle M." "Why?" He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "Seems I'm not much good at moving on anymore." Hope flickered in her chest. "Yates, about the way we left things, you don't need to explain. You had family obligations." "I understood. I'm not explaining. I'm apologizing." She turned toward him on the seat. "I was afraid. I've been afraid since the accident, certain that no one could want me, that I didn't deserve happiness. When you talked about Denver, all those fears came rushing back." He slowed the horses, finally giving her his full attention. "And now I know what I want. Where I belong." She gathered her courage. "Even if what I want doesn't want me anymore." Yates pulled the wagon to a complete stop, setting the brake before turning to face her. Do you have any idea what these months have been like? Wondering if you'd come back? If Boston would remind you that you were meant for finer things than a schoolhouse in a mining town. Boston reminded me of only one thing, that I left my heart in Colorado. She reached tentatively for his hand. With you. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and achingly familiar. I meant what I said that night on your porch. Every word. So did I? When I said I was afraid. She smiled tremulously. But I'm more afraid of never knowing what might have been. Of living my whole life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to believe someone could love me. Scars and all. Yates lifted his free hand to her face, tracing the line of her scar with a tenderness that made her heart ache. These marks we carry, they're part of our story, not the whole of it. Then he was kissing her, there on the rutted road with autumn's golden light spilling over them. His lips were gentle at first, then hungry as she responded, arms winding around his neck. 3 months of uncertainty and longing pouring into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I bought land, he said quietly. 10 acres outside town. Started building a house this summer. Her eyes widened. You're staying in Silvercreek? Permanently. That depends. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that had first captured her heart. On whether the lady I built it for wants to share it with me. The lady might need more details, she whispered, hardly daring to hope. Yates took her face in both hands, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. Felicity Taylor, I love you. I have since the moment you stood up to me in that general store. I want to marry you, have children with you, grow old with you in that house I'm building. His thumbs brushed her cheeks. I want forever with you, if you'll have me. The word forever hung between them, weighted with promise. In all her life, no one had offered Felicity forever. Not since the accident. Not with her scarred face and damaged soul. Yet here was this man, this beautiful, steadfast man, offering not just acceptance, but a lifetime. Offering to love her exactly as she was. Yes, she said, tears spilling over. Yes to forever. Yates' smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He kissed her again, sealing their promise, before releasing the brake and urging the horses forward. Let's go home, he said, his hand finding hers again. I've got a lot to show you. The wedding took place on Christmas Eve in Silvercreek's small church, pine boughs and red ribbons decorating the simple wooden pews. Snow fell gently outside, blanketing the town in pristine white as Felicity walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, her honey-blonde hair crowned with a circle of winter berries. Yates waited at the altar, tall and handsome in his new suit, his face alight with a joy that matched her own. When she reached him, he took her hands without hesitation, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles in that familiar, reassuring way. You're beautiful, he whispered for her ears alone. For the first time in years, Felicity believed it. Not because the scar had faded, it never would, but because when Yates looked at her, she knew he saw her completely. The broken and the healing, the fear and the courage, the past and the future they would build together. The minister spoke of love's endurance, of the sacred bond between husband and wife, but Felicity barely heard the words. She was lost in Yates' eyes, in the promise they held, in the certainty that she had finally found her home. When it came time for their vows, Yates' voice rang clear and strong through the hushed church. Felicity, before I met you, I was just passing through life, never staying long enough to put down roots. You changed that. You made me want to build something lasting. His hands tightened around hers. I promise to love you completely, your strength and your doubts, your smiles and your tears, your beauty that goes soul deep. I promise to be your shelter in storms and your companion in sunshine. I promise forever, and I will spend every day making sure you never doubt it. Tears blurred her vision as she spoke her own vows. Yates, you saw me when I was hiding. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You taught me that scars aren't something to hide, but something to honor because they mean we survived. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I promise to trust in your love even when my fears whisper otherwise. I promise to be your home as you have become mine. I promise to love you completely, honestly, and without reservation, forever. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs gently tracing the line of her scar before he kissed her. The congregation erupted in applause, but Felicity heard only the beating of her heart, perfectly in time with his. Spring came again to Colorado, painting the land in vibrant green and wildflower hues. On the 10 acres outside Silvercreek, the house Yates had begun the previous summer stood complete, a sturdy 2-story home with wide porches and large windows that framed views of the distant mountains. Felicity continued teaching at the schoolhouse, riding to and from town each day on the mare Yates had given her as a wedding gift. In the evenings, they worked side by side in the garden she'd planted, planning for the future that stretched before them like an open road. "What do you think about adding a room?" Yates asked one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching twilight settle over their land. His hand rested gently on her still flat stomach, where their first child had just begun to grow. "Already planning expansions?" She laughed, covering his hand with her own. "The house has plenty of room. For now." He kissed her temple, lingering over the scar that had once defined her, but now was simply one thread in the tapestry of their shared life. "But I'm thinking long-term. The O'Malleys are going to need space to grow." "The O'Malleys," she repeated, savoring the plural. "I never imagined I could be this happy." Yates drew her closer, his arms strong and secure around her shoulders. "When I said forever, I meant it. Every day, every challenge, every joy." His voice softened. "Every child." Felicity turned in his embrace, finding his lips with hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future. As darkness fell around them, stars appearing one by one in the vast Colorado sky, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. In this house, on this land, in these arms. The West had taught her to be strong. Yates had taught her to be loved. Together, they had built something neither of them had believed possible when they first met. A love strong enough to heal old wounds, brave enough to face whatever came next, deep enough to last forever. Scars and all,